What was Palpatine's reaction to the death of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and why did Darth Vader keep it a secret from him following dueling Kenobi on the Death Star? The moment that Vader passed his blade through Master Kenobi was one of the ultimate triumph. For a good part of his life, Vader had obsessively searched for his former master to give him payback for what occurred on Mustafar. Their dynamic in this regard was fleshed out even more in the Kenobi series. We got to see just how deeply driven Vader was to find Kenobi and to put an end to him, and when he finally achieved this on the first Death Star, it wasn't quite what he had imagined. Obi-Wan had spoken something about achieving a power that Vader could not comprehend, and then he vanished without a trace. We know that the Dark Lord was incredibly troubled the moment that this occurred, but what did Palpatine think about the death of the Jedi, one who was the greatest thorn in his side? Surprisingly, the answer is not exactly straightforward, so let's open a holocron and find out. There are two completely different outcomes both in Legends and canon. Weirdly, neither contains a story or a moment where Vader directly tells Palpatine what occurred, and only in Legends does Palpatine actually know. From what we can tell in canon, Palpatine never actually found out how Obi-Wan died, and that's because Vader had apparently kept it a secret from him. We find out this happens in the 2015 Darth Vader comic run in the very first issue, as Vader is reporting back to the Emperor on Coruscant after the destruction of the Death Star. In this moment, Palpatine is absolutely livid with his apprentice, blaming him for the destruction of their grand battle station, and sticking him with the full blame. Since Tarkin wasn't around and Vader was the only survivor, he had to take the brunt of the Emperor's wrath, as he spent most of their conversation berating Vader over the entire ordeal, one that led to Vader's ultimate demotion. At the end of it all, Palpatine would walk with Vader to his office, where a strange man was waiting to meet with the Emperor, and after another brief interaction, Palpatine sits down in his chair and curtly asks Vader if there is anything else that he needs to report. In the moment, flashbacks of the events past several days play through Vader's mind, the moment he duels Kenobi and the moment that he kills him, watching the Jedi Master's robes fall emptily to the floor. One of the Imperial officers had asked him about who that was, and Vader simply replied that it was a foolish old man, one who thought that he could guide gifted children. The flashbacks continue as Vader is chasing Luke through the trench run, mentioning that the Force was strong with him, and then later discovering that the boy had the lightsaber of Anakin Skywalker, that he was the one that Kenobi gifted Anakin's lightsaber to. But once the flashbacks end, Vader blankly stares at Palpatine and says, "Nothing to trouble yourself with, Master." With that, Palpatine just dismisses Vader, telling him to go and to never fail again. As Vader leaves, however, Sidious's eyes remain locked on the Dark Lord. So in canon, Vader decided not to tell Sidious about Obi-Wan or Luke, and while we know that Palpatine only later finds out about Vader's obsession with finding the rebel who destroyed the Death Star, Vader himself never tells him directly. However, from this point on, there's never really a canonical indication that Palpatine ever knew or cared about Obi-Wan's death. Of course, the ending of the comic scene does leave a little to interpretation, as Palpatine keenly watches Vader as he departs, fixated on the back of the Dark Lord's helmet. There's a very large possibility, bordering on near certainty, that Palpatine's reason for staring at Vader was because he could sense that his apprentice was hiding something. Unfortunately, because the Death Star was destroyed suddenly though, there was no time to explore any security hollows or reports. This means that it's unlikely at this point in time that Darth Sidious knew anything of Kenobi's presence, the reason being that he was not keeping tabs on Obi-Wan the way that he was Yoda, and we do have a story of when Palpatine felt Yoda's death. As in canon, we know that Palpatine was searching for Yoda's Force signature, and could sense when it went out, keeping tabs on his old rival. But just as he had during his time as Supreme Chancellor, he cared very little for Kenobi, and was solely focused on the Grand Master. But why would Darth Vader keep Obi-Wan's death a secret from Sidious? On the surface, we can look to the fact that there was a strange man in the Emperor's office, and Vader didn't feel like talking about a personal matter in front of this stranger. But there's definitely a deeper reason. Vader spent so much time looking for and obsessing over Kenobi that Palpatine genuinely had to tell him to stop. In the Kenobi series, the Emperor brought Vader's focus and loyalty into question when he saw how troubled he was over Kenobi. Sidious insinuated that if Vader's past cannot be overcome, then he has no place as a Sith. In that moment in Palpatine's office, it's a very bad time to be bringing up Kenobi when Palpatine's main concern was the Death Star. He was absolutely furious with the state of how his battle station had turned out, and it probably would not have made things better for Vader had he started talking about his old master. Knowing Sidious, he would have accused Vader of being distracted, which caused a moment of blindness, resulting in the Death Star's destruction. We also have to remember that Vader is a person who likes to figure things out for himself. When Kenobi vanished in the Force, Vader was deeply disturbed and probably didn't want Palpatine sensing his weakness or his fear. And since Obi-Wan is deeply connected to a Force-sensitive boy that now had Anakin's lightsaber, it was all the more reason to keep Palpatine in the dark. The Emperor had a habit of butting into Vader's business, something which is explored heavily in the comic run. This mission was an undertaking that Vader himself needed to figure out, without alerting bureaucrats, or worse, his own master. He kept it a secret that there was a boy with Anakin's lightsaber. Now when it comes to Legends though, the Emperor is fully aware of Obi-Wan's death, and was not only pleased by it, but used it to taunt Luke. He doesn't mention Kenobi vanished in the Force, and there's a chance that Vader kept the secret in Legends as well. But this is what the novelization for Return of the Jedi says. "Tell me, young Skywalker," the Emperor commented, "who has been involved in your training until now?" Luke was silent. He would reveal nothing. "Oh, I know it was Obi-Wan Kenobi at first," the wicked ruler continued, rubbing his fingers together as if trying to remember. Then pausing, his lips creased into a sneer. "Of course we are familiar with the talent of Obi-Wan Kenobi, especially when it came to training Jedi." He nodded politely in Vader's direction, indicating Obi-Wan's previous star pupil. Vader stood without responding, without moving. Luke tensed with fury at the Emperor's defamation of Ben, though of course to the Emperor it was praise, and he bridled even more, knowing the Emperor was so nearly right. He tried to bring his anger under control, though for Luke it seemed to please the malevolent dictator greatly. Palpatine noted the emotions of Luke's face and chuckled. "So in your early training you have followed your father's path. It would seem as if you have followed the path of Anakin. But alas, Obi-Wan is now dead, I believe." His elder student here saw to that, gesturing towards Vader in a hand motion towards the Dark Lord. In Legends, Sidious would continue mocking Luke as he found out through Luke's feelings that Yoda also trained him. As we would expect, the Dark Lord of the Sith was immensely pleased with the death of the Jedi Master, as well as the Grand Master. Rightly so, he gloated over Obi-Wan's death, using it to draw Luke's feelings out. In Legends, Palpatine greatly enjoyed the cruel irony of Vader finally being able to kill Obi-Wan. Kenobi was the one man that Palpatine could never get rid of no matter how hard he tried. He had sent Grievous after him more than once, created specific plans to murder the Jedi Master, including luring him to an evil Sith planet literally engineered to destroy Jedi in the most painful ways. If you want to hear about that story though, be sure to check out our holocron about Zygula, the most evil planet in the galaxy. Kenobi had been Sidious's biggest thorn since day one. After he got rid of Qui-Gon, he assumed that the troubles would be over, but they had only just begun. Not only was Obi-Wan the one person standing in the way of turning Anakin to the dark side, but he also killed Maul, Sidious's prized assassin, stifled Dooku's ability to grow as a Sith, and somehow managed to kill General Grievous, as well as following this, avoided Order 66 and crippled the Chosen One, ruining Sidious's ultimate prize of all of his decades of planning and scheming. And after all of that, he manages to avoid the Empire and train the boy who would destroy the Death Star. You can believe the day Obi-Wan's robes fell and the lightsaber clattered lifelessly to the floor was the day that Sidious was rejoicing upon his throne. Assuming Vader did tell Palpatine about Kenobi's disappearance, I would go as far as to say that the Dark Lord probably didn't even care. The one Jedi that he hated more than any other, more than Mace Windu, even more than Yoda, was finally dead. Kenobi was gone. But anyway, my friends, that was how Sidious reacted to Obi-Wan Kenobi's death in Legends continuity, and how Vader kept it a secret from him in Star Wars canon. So tell us, what are your thoughts on this? Why do you think Vader decided not to tell Sidious about Kenobi's death? And what are your thoughts in his reaction in Legends? As always, my friends, thank you so much for visiting the channel today, and may the Force be with you always.